morning. My name is Erin McNeill, and I'm the Learning Specialist at Keep Indiana Learning. I spent 14 years as an English teacher when I was asked to take over the ENL program at my high school. I had no idea where to start. So this presentation covers the background about ENL students and programs in Indiana that I needed to understand how to effectively teach ENL students. Today, we're going to start with an overview of the WIDA framework and all of the components and services they provide for schools, teachers, and ELs. And then we will focus on ELL, ENL students and the resources teachers need to effectively teach them. So what is the WIDA framework and how can I use it to support English learners? Indiana uses the WIDA framework as a comprehensive system to help teachers and schools meet the needs of English learners. There are three main components to the WIDA framework. WIDA tests identify students' proficiency levels and show what they can do in the areas of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The WIDA screener is given once to determine whether a student's language proficiency is deemed fluent. Students who test as not fluent have limited English proficiency, and they are identified as English learners and receive services. The WIDA access test is given annually to English learners to determine their current language proficiency. Students continue to take WIDA access annually until they earn a score of a 5, which Indiana defines as fluent. We will review scoring and how these scores affect students a little later in this presentation. In addition to WIDA tests, the WIDA framework includes English language development standards. WIDA ELD standards provide a roadmap for educators to support their students' academic language development and achievement. And finally, WIDA can-do descriptors provide details on what language learners can do at various stages of their English language development in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Together, the components of the WIDA framework report what students have shown they are able to do on the test and provide progressive standards that define the language skills students need to develop next, as well as to provide a breakdown of what typical students at each proficiency level can do so that teachers can more easily determine ways they can appropriately scaffold learning activities and assessments for students. So in addition to the WIDA test, this ELD framework includes English language development standards that provide a roadmap for educators to support academic language development and achievement. They are defined for social and instructional purposes, as well as English language arts, math, science, and social studies. These standards were updated in 2020, and they address the latest theory, policy, practice, as well as ideas and feedback WIDA solicited from educators around the world. These standards focus on communication needs, the language of learning, meaning making, and the dynamic nature and changing nature of language. And finally, WIDA can-do descriptors provide details on what language learners can do at various stages of English language development in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The new 2020 can-do descriptors are further broken into the key language uses of explain, argue, narrate, and inform. These can-do descriptors, key uses addition, provide examples of academic language use and help teachers differentiate curriculum, instruction, and assessment based on the student's proficiency level. Can-do descriptors are meant to help guide the planning and conversation around meaningful participation of language learners in course content, instruction, and assessment. So these descriptors are labeled for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And they tell you at each level, level 1 is entering, level 5 is bridging, what students should be able to do with those skills. Why do new teachers need to know about ELL, ENL students? Indiana is proudly home to nearly 120,000 students who speak at least one language other than English, with over 275 languages represented. There are approximately 78,000 students who have been formally identified as English learners, which is roughly 5% of our total student population in the state. At the bottom of this slide, I've also shared the QR code for the IDOE English Learner Guidebook, which reviews all of Indiana's policies and procedures for ELL students in Indiana schools. It is a great tool to have handy. How are English learners identified? When a student enrolls in school for the first time, their parent or guardian fills out a home language survey. If the HLS indicates that they speak a language other than English, they are then tested using a WIDA screener, usually within 30 days of enrollment. Students who are not proficient on the screener become identified as limited English proficient and are provided services and assessed annually. Students are tested over 4 modes of communication: listening, writing, reading, and speaking. Students are then assigned proficiency levels based on the communication skills for each of the 4 domains. There are 6 levels of English language proficiency on the WIDA screener and WIDA Access. Students who earn a level 5 or higher are deemed fluent, or FEP, fluent English proficient. Students who earn a level 1 through 4 are still limited English proficient, or LEP. LEP students receive services from ENL teachers and continue to test until reaching that fluent status. After a student is tested, teachers will receive an ILP, or individualized learning plan. Indiana has an ILP system, and those ILPs are created at the student's school and contain these elements: instructional and assessment accommodations, any modifications for students, WIDA Access and/or WIDA screener scores and proficiency levels, and student goals. These are updated yearly and they are legally binding. There is more information about ILPs in the IDOE English Learner Guidebook. When I began teaching ENL, ELL students, I had lots of questions after reading my caseload ILPs. I spent a lot of time asking the adults in my school questions about what my students needed. Eventually, I learned that I needed to talk to my students to understand what they needed. Their answers and their literacy projects eventually became the topic of my dissertation research. So I have spent a lot of time thinking about how to effectively plan for the students in our classrooms. I learned from observing students and speaking with them that most students spend their day in a dominant English context, listening to a language that is many times unfamiliar. I looked over their tests and their ILP documents, and I realized that we needed to practice these communication skills daily. I began to plan by ensuring that we were listening, speaking, reading, and writing every day. Some of the ways that I did this is I practiced attendance questions. So I had students answer a question every day to take attendance. It could be as simple as, what is your favorite dessert? We did a lot of turn and talks as review. We listened to podcasts that coordinated with our units. I asked students to write or share stories from their life that shared themes with our units of study. And we also read aloud in small groups and discussed what we were reading every few pages. And it worked. 85% of our student scores rose in that first year, and we continue to practice these language domains daily. So the WIDA Resource Library has can-do descriptors for each grade level. This document was so beneficial for me. Using this resource, you can pick a grade level and proficiency level, and then differentiate assignments for the ELLs in your classroom. These guides even give you ideas on graphic organizers or planning a plot line. So they were very helpful to me as I was trying to navigate how to accommodate each of the students at each of their levels within my classroom. The interactive websites at the University of Wisconsin-Madison were also great for individualized or small group instruction. I used English Interactive often, as well as the ESL videos for listening and speaking. They also have added an audio section on their website that shows different sources you can use for audio and listening skills. Color in Colorado is a great site. I found this site on the Twitter chat called ELL Chat. They have great book suggestions, great resources. As you can see, they're broken down by grade. I was in a high school, and the reading instruction link here was invaluable to me as I taught students how to read in a language they were unfamiliar with. So, of course, there are many resources for ELL students, and we will review those in another video later on in our new teaching cadre. So I am hoping to stop here and ask if you have any questions. If you do, I ask that you please post them in the chat or send them to me, either tweet them or send me an email. You can find me on the Keep Indiana Learning site, but please reach out if there's anything I can do to help you better reach your ELL students. Thank you.